Welcome to our continuing series of interviews with prominent Leonians. I'm your host, Bill Ziegler, and today we are very fortunate to have Kathleen Clark, a Leonia resident for 29 years and a nationally renowned playwright, as our special guest. So welcome, Kate.
I'm so happy to be here.
I want to remind the audience that the purpose of this series is to provide people in the future with a perspective of those Leonians who have made contributions to their community and have established themselves through various success stories, what their story was like, and to better appreciate who we were at this time in Leonia's history, so to speak. And it's also to provide current Leonians with a perspective of their neighbors and who some people in Leonia are that they may not have met yet, who are making a difference by contributing to their community and outside of that community. So Kathleen, Kate, we are so happy to have you as our guest today. You have been a Leonian for going on 29 years now. So you're no stranger to this community. Time
flies.
And since we definitely have that in common, before I start to talk about your incredible career journey, let's talk a little bit about Leonia.
Great.
What was it that attracted you to Leonia? What was it that made you think that this was a special community?
Well, that's a great question, because we were living in Hoboken and we had a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we needed to move out of Hoboken, but all the great doctors that I had were here in the Inglewood area. So I would drive through Leonia on my way, and every time I drove through Leonia, I would look on Main Street, I go, oh, now this is the great town. So we weren't looking this way, but then there was a great celebration here in Leonia. Do you remember this? And they had the lobster at the high school. It was
Absolutely.
a big festival.
Lobster Fest.
Lobster Fest.
Yes.
So we go to that. I said to my husband, Richard, we should keep looking in Leonia, because this is
Was that part of Leonia's centennial?
I think it might have been.
There was some big anniversary celebration.
Big celebration. Yes. But we go to the high school for the lobster, and we looked at each other and went, lobster, we have to move to this town. And everyone was it's just, a great experience. Everybody was so friendly and so nice, and all we had to do was mention that we were thinking of moving here, and everyone was so welcoming. And I did know some people in Hoboken who knew people, Ann Brown, in town, who worked in the theater, and we both worked in the theater and knew her from that. So Annette Lynch was someone else that we knew through people in Hoboken, and so we started looking, and we kept looking at one house after another until we found the one we loved.
And I know that as your kids were enrolled in ACS, you told me, you shared with me, and perhaps you can share with everybody else now, how impressed you were with Ralph Giuseppe.
Absolutely. That was the other thing. When we decided we love this town, so now let's look into the schools, which, that's what everyone does. And we met Ralph Giuseppe, and he was so welcoming and took us around a tour of the school.
And he was the principal at the time.
He was the principal, and then he took us at the end of the day to stand with him at the end of the day. And as all the kids left, he would call them by name. Bye, Joe, bye, see you tomorrow, see you tomorrow. It was wonderful.
It was, and one of your sons, I don't remember if it was Josh or Clark, had Joanne McGargy as his 3rd grade ACS teacher, and she, of course, became the superintendent of schools.
Yes, and she was unbelievable. She was wonderful. I would just say that Joanne McGargy, my son, had a joke, because he was very into film his whole life, and she used to say to him, when you win your Oscar, I want you to say, thank you, Mrs. McGargy. And he was like, of course, that's what I have in mind. I plan on doing that, so anyhow, they had a good time.
Yeah, she was special, too.
Yeah.
So I've said that, you have 3 children, you've been in Leonia for 29 years. Everyone in your family, it seems, is connected to the arts somehow. Your mom and you grew up in a very rural community in Morris County,
Right.
Mine Hill, New Jersey.
Mine
And your
Hill.
mom was really into theater.
Right.
And you can trace, and this is really interesting to me, you can trace your family history in New Jersey back to 1690.
I can. On my father's side, the Clarks, they landed in Long Island and made their way through Elizabeth and into New Jersey until they wound up in Morris County.
Wow.
And so, they say that's where they stayed. I don't think I mentioned to you that the house that I grew up in Mine Hill was right next door to where my grandparents, my father's parents, lived. So my father was born in that house, and then he moved next door to raise us. And then when he inherited that house, he moved back in to the house, and he died in that house where he was born. So he was born in that house and died in the house.
That's
Yeah, so.
pretty unusual, and that's a lot of history. And you did share with me that your mom was really into theater. And what role do you think that had in your own interest?
Well, it's so interesting. One thing I'm not sure I mentioned when we talked was that I love the theater, and I loved reading, and she loved reading, and she loved the theater and would buy cast albums. But we didn't go to New York, even though we're 45 minutes away. We didn't go into New York much for economic reasons and for whatever reason. But what I started doing, because she was such a reader, is I started reading scripts. So I would read play scripts. Like people would be reading books, I would read books, but I would also read play scripts. And to this day, if I want to see a play in New York and I miss it, I order the script. So that is a way, if you can't get to New York or you can't get to see the theater, you start reading scripts. And it's like,
well, and if you fast forward in terms of your own career, now you're writing the scripts.
Right, writing scripts. And when I had to make a living, doing a day job while I was writing, I would read scripts for people. I was a literary manager. So I was a literary manager at a theater in Madison called the Playwright Theater of New Jersey, which meant I would be reading scripts all the time.
So not only was your mom so interested in theater, and she helped you develop an interest,
Right.
obviously, now that you're a playwright, all of your children apparently have some connection to the theater.
Right.
And your husband is a producer,
Right.
a theatrical producer
Right.
on Broadway.
Right. And he started out as working in nonprofit theaters. I mean, he started doing every job in the theater possible. At Circle Rep, he was managing director. Then he went out on his own and became independent, did Penn and Teller and small. He started off Broadway small plays until he wound up doing The Producers and Hairspray and big Broadway musicals.
Well, you have written a number of plays now that have been, done in New York, have been put nationally, off-Broadway throughout the U.S., and we're going to focus on some of those in a second. And I also know that you are part of the MFA program now at Fairfield University, so that you can impart some of your experiences and wisdom to the next generation through that program.
Right. I came to teaching, later on about 10 years ago, but boy, do I love it. And I teach in an MFA program, which is a low residency program, which means for people who want to get their master's degree, they go into class twice a year, and the rest of the time they're mentoring with a teacher like me on the computer. And then 3 years they have their master's degree. It's a great program. So this is a creative program, and they needed someone to specialize in dramatic writing. And we found each other, the program.
I think that's fantastic when you can make those kinds of links. Now, your first job, surprisingly, was not in the theater. You were an assistant director of admissions at Quinnipiac and Hartford.
Right, University of Hartford.
Yeah. And so that was a little bit different, but quickly you, as luck would have it, you had an opportunity to write your first play, sort of about a life-changing event. And then I think you realized, this is for me, and this is what I want to do. And it turns out, maybe we can talk a little bit about this, you left your job as the assistant director of admissions to go with your then husband at his suggestion, on a sailboat across the world.
Well, that was the
intent,
right?
Yes.
We made it as far as, the Bahamas. I made it as far as the Bahamas.
And I think the title of your play, your first play, sort of says it all. The first play's title was Are We?
Is Everybody
Happy?
Right.
Yes, and I don't think you were at that point.
I was happy writing it, but it was honestly, living on a boat is such a lonely existence. It was a 35-foot boat. It was the two of us, pretty lonely, and I'm a pretty social person. He was fine. I was, starting to write plays in order to sort of talk to people in a way, like how my social life was, the characters in my play. And, it was about two people on a boat, but I enjoyed it. I loved it. What a great experience. Fantastic experience to sail for a year. And then I was happy to leave and come to New York.
And that's kind of when you got back to New York, you decided that you actually decided education wasn't for you. Theater and the arts was more your call.
That really hit me when I was doing an intern program at Williamstown Theater Festival, and I only took one summer off from the education world to do it. And when I was there, I thought, okay, it was like an epiphany.
Was that the summer of 1980?
That was the summer of 1980 when I was in Williamstown, and I thought, I was sitting in a rehearsal with Austin Pendleton and Blythe Danner, so many wonderful people, and I thought, I think I was in education, and I did love my job, but I thought I was in it because I thought you can't make a living.
Right, in the theater.
Yeah, in the theater. I mean, that just wasn't the track, but then I found out people do.
Well, there were three, as you shared with me, magical summers between 1981 and 1983 when you worked for the O'Neill National Playwrights Conference.
Right.
That really opened your eyes to
Absolutely.
the world of theater and some of the people who were in it. And I wrote some notes here of folks that, in your job, you handled all the scripts brought in by playwrights like
Right.
Lee Blessing, August Wilson, John Patrick Shanley. You worked for Lloyd Richards, and you worked with actors that were up and coming in their careers who are, fairly big names. I mean, Kathy Bates, Angela Bassett, John Turturro.
Kevin Kline was there. I mean, you name it, the list was so long.
So I can see how excited you would become in that environment, and then realizing that this is for you. But it is a very, very tough field to get into.
Right.
And, your mom helps you in igniting an interest. This summer helps you develop a respect for these outstanding playwrights, and you're handling their scripts.
Right.
And you take pen in hand and you submit to the O'Neill
Right.
National Playwrights Conference 2 plays, Banner and Southern Comforts. I have Southern Comforts right here, which is a very popular play that you've
Right.
written. It's currently been across the U.S.
Yes.
Now, I should just mention that O'Neill Conference will accept 1 out of 100 plays. You had 2
Right.
accepted,
Right.
which is
It was a
extraordinary.
great thing for me, especially having worked there and then being inspired by them and then to submit and to be accepted was such a wonderful journey. Like I had watched and admired and then wrote, and that was 1986, and then wrote a second one and got it accepted again. It was the beginning for me, really. It was the beginning of my play writing.
Now, you told me that with Southern Comforts, you had handed the script to one of the actresses, Dixie Carter.
Yes, I sent it to her. She read it on a plane ride and called me up. And then she asked me, it was so funny, she said, would you mind if I gave the script to Mr. Holbrook? She called her husband Mr. Holbrook. I'm like,
And that's Hal Holbrook.
That's Hal Holbrook. And I'm like, fine, go ahead, give Mr. Holbrook the script. And then I was getting ready to go out one night here in Leonia, in the house. I'm getting ready to go out and the phone rings, and this is Hal Holbrook. And I'm, let me sit down for a minute here. And he said, I love the script. Dixie and I want to do the script if you want us. And here are some things, you know, that maybe we should talk about, like about the ending. And I was like, whatever, let's talk. And it turns out that Hal Holbrook was just the smartest, the best dramaturg. He just knew script inside and out and helped me. I mean, really helped
Fantastic.
me. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I imagine as a new playwright getting a call from Hal Holbrook and saying, would you mind if Dixie Carter and I did your play? I think the answer is pretty simple.
Yeah. I mean, and then they invited me and the director, that we both went to Nashville to their house to work on the script, which was another great adventure.
Well, the show has been across the U.S. and it's still being
It's still being done. I just got a notice last night. The publishing company sends you notices to tell you where the play's being done, and it was just in Arizona, and I just read last night it's going to be in the Adirondacks this summer. And it's a 2-character play, and it's a love story. And I mean, just to give you an idea.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask if you could give a little snapshot.
Well, it's my mom came up from Tennessee at 18, and she stayed here in New Jersey, and her mother and siblings followed her. And it's basically the story of my grandmother from the South meeting a man from New Jersey, and eventually getting married and moving in together, and that is what Southern Comfort's about. It's a romance of people like over 65 who meet late in life, and they're very different. She's vivacious, and he's a New Jersey kind of quiet, reserved man who's, you know, set in his ways, and she's like, come on, let's live. So it's funny also, but it's poignant and funny, and I think that theaters enjoy, I think they enjoy the content, but also just, I wasn't thinking this when I wrote it, but it's 2 characters and it's 1 set. So any theater, it's very simple. You know, they build the set, they have the 2 older characters, and they're off.
You know, I've heard the adage that good writers write about what they know best. And the next play, which I have in my hand here, which is fantastic because I've seen it, Secrets of a Soccer Mom.
Right.
And I saw this, I believe, at our Players Guild in Leonia.
You
That's
did.
one of the places. Now, this was, again, writing about what you know best. This was inspired by your being an AYSO soccer coach.
First
In
a
Leonia.
soccer mom, and then a soccer coach.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about this one and what inspired it? And,
Yes.
And you had a fantastic reading of this with Anne Brown and Laura Benanti.
Laura Benanti, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was really an incredible reading. But it started because in town, I could mention names of who was in this team game that you would know, but it was the mothers against the sons. And the sons were like 6 or 7 years old.
So this was like a special coaches against the kids.
Not coaches,
Oh,
the
just the
moms.
moms. Okay.
The soccer moms
Right,
playing their sons. And at one point, one of the moms looked at me, because we thought we'd let them win, you know, because they're little. And one of the moms said, you know, I know how to play this game. And I'm like, well, I think we sort of all know how. So we were sort of holding back. So anyhow, that's all that happened. It was just a one moment where we had this funny exchange about, you know, I could really get out there and play, you know. And we're like, come on. So that spark turned into this play, which becomes halfway through the mom saying, all right, you know, you go down there, I'll pass it to you, you get it in. And it becomes a little bit of a farce where they're running around kids and, you know, the kids are like crying and so I was like, let me tell you a very quick story about playwriting that's so interesting. At the end of Secrets of the Soccer Mom, the women lost and the boys won originally when I first wrote the script. And they were like, it's fine, you know, we just had so much fun and it turned out okay. And then I gave the script to a writer whose name is Israel Horowitz. And I don't know if you knew Israel, but he was well-known, prominent playwright, and he read my script. And he wasn't too enthusiastic. And then the next morning, like at 9 in the morning, he calls me and he goes, okay, I woke up in the middle of the night and I have to tell you what. You have built the script to the women winning. And for the women not to win is why I felt kind of like the play wasn't working. Oh. And the minute he said that, I knew he was right. And I sat down, I made the women win. And then I had the kids go, way to go, Mom. You know, good, you did a great job, and the kids were happy, and then from that point on, the play was.
Was there a
well
larger
received.
message that you wanted to send by having the women win versus the kids?
Yes, which there's a line in the play. I thought of this because Laura Benanti's father at a reading.
That was at the Little Theater in the high school.
Yeah, and after the reading was over, they had a discussion about it. And people were talking about the content more than they were the play itself, like about being, there's a volunteer, and this woman raised her hand and said, I think I volunteer too much. I need to do something for myself. And then there's a line in the play that says, we are our own oppressors, meaning women hold themselves back, right? Instead of going for something, they're like, no, like in this play. And Laura Benanti's father, who's a therapist, said, you have plenty of help. It's like you don't just oppress yourself. You have plenty of help of people saying, no, don't go for it. So I wanted this play to be about these women who went for it and won. And for their young boys to go, yes,
right,
great.
Has anybody, after seeing the play, expressed the other view, like you should have let the boys win?
No, never.
Okay, well that tells you something too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The other thing about this is, we had a play reading in this room very recently in October.
Right.
And it was one of your latest works.
Yes.
Good Morning, Good Mother. A pandemic-related experience that was so touching that for the 40 people in this room, a good number of them became very emotional because you struck through your writing an emotional nerve that was very intense. And as a playwright, heading into a first reading, like you had here.
Right.
I don't think you know necessarily what to expect. So how did that feel when you saw your play being received the way it was?
Well, there's so much to say about that because, you can see right here, having those actors in this space is so inspiring. Seeing my play in this space with the actors up here and you and everyone we know sitting out there helped me actually to visualize the play and the next level of what to do with it, But just seeing the way people took it, it was one of my most personal plays. I always write, a lot of my plays are personal, but this was the most personal, being about my mother, and it's almost a one-person show. There's two people, but it's a one-person monologue. And seeing it here, writing a play takes so long. There's so many steps to it. And you see people, oh, that's great. It's like, yeah, well, now I have another couple of months to even get to the next draft, and then a couple of months to get to the draft after that. And it's very, very hard because you think you have it, and then you hear it done by actors. That's the key. And the actors do it.
Good
these are really good actors who go, oh, I see. I need to change the ending, or oh, I see, I got to change that beginning. And then remember, after the reading, your friend said something to me, which really gave me such a great idea for how to frame the play.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I know how well received it was, and I'm sure that's also a relief for you. But I also, if I remember correctly, you had intended not necessarily to come in with that play at all. There was another play that you were going to have as a reading.
Right.
So what was the creative process that you went through that, I think it was a week or two before, that you said, oh, I have a new one?
I went away to finish up the original play, which was on the flyer we sent out. It was called Auditions at 8, which was a play I had in mind, and I'd been working on it, and I liked the way it was going. And then I went away to the beach by myself for a week to finish, and I couldn't write it. It just wasn't coming. And all of a sudden, honestly, I'm not kidding, I stayed up an entire night. I saw the sun come up over the ocean because I was right on the beach, and I wrote the play, the one-woman play about my mother, because it was just, I had to do it. I just had to write it, and it just came out.
And that's the one that we were fortunate enough to see here.
Yeah.
What's the next step now for a play like that? How does this develop to then be produced?
Well, it's sort of like, trying to visualize and think it through of, the play, luckily for me, and sometimes it's just magical like that. That one night, that play that I wrote, staying up all night, the content really works. I mean, the journey works, the story works.
It does.
And for, it doesn't always happen that way, but it did. But the beginning and the end, the framing device of her being in the car, right? It's a woman in a car telling a story, wasn't quite right. So I'm trying to get that right. And but finding the time, I think, and finding it, and to get it just right, it's just so time consuming. That's what it is. So that's the step. So what I'll do is I'll have another reading, and I'll just keep having readings and readings after every draft. And then I start submitting. Once I think the next draft or the one after that, I actually have a lot of people in the theater, because I've been in it so long, that I can just, they say send me anything. It's different when you're younger, and I have advice for all my students of how you do it and go about meeting people and how you
break into it. Very
but
competitive.
Luckily, with the experiences I've had and the people I know, I could call, actually write artistic directors and say, hi, I have a new one, do you want to read it? And that doesn't mean they're going to say yes either. I mean, just because I've worked with them before.
It's still a business.
Yeah, it's still a business, and they say, oh, we really like this, but, next time. So, and every writer, if and I read, besides reading play scripts and books, I just read so many biographies, especially about writers. And I mean, you read these stories about Tennessee Williams and Edward Albee, they got to a certain point in New York after they had these major hits where they were, oh, I don't know about that play. So it's not guaranteed that your plays are going to be done.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Who are some of the, I know you had mentioned to me Thornton Wilde at one point, who did Our Town. Are there several playwrights that stand out as inspirational for you?
I just mentioned Tennessee Williams.
Right.
For me, especially all my life, especially with my Southern roots and my mom, and Thornton Wilde or Our Town.
That's
every time it's just like that says it. To me, that's what you strive for to be there. August Wilson, because I worked with August all those summers and became such a fan of his plays. And I love comedies too, and I love Alan Ayckbourn. He's a British writer, and he writes poignant comedies, and that I honestly, I have to say, he's a big influence, because his thing about writing is life is tragedy interrupted by comedy, and comedy interrupted by tragedy. That's how he looks at life, and that's what his plays are like. And that's what I think really is wonderful for people to see and hear. And as a writer, as a creative person, that's what I try to do, is to make it funny yet poignant too.
And now you're also, in addition to being a playwright, you had shared with me that you're looking at a TV pilot. You're currently writing a TV pilot. That's a little bit different.
Very different for me, and exciting. Yeah. And it's about gun reform and gun control in this country. And somehow it's not a play. The idea I have for it, I have a certain specific idea of how it should be told. And some things just are not plays. And like sometimes TV shows couldn't be a play. Even though it seems like the same movies and TV and plays, they're such different genres that this one cries out to be a TV show.
Well, we are so fortunate to have you in Leonia. And
I love
it was
Leonia.
wonderful. Thank you for spending this time with us today and sharing those stories. Very meaningful. And I'm going to look forward to the work that you're currently doing and seeing if the TV pilot...
Right, I'll be sure to let you know. And we'll do another reading, and we'll see where that play goes.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Bill.